Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shengen, for asking me to step in yesterday. I didn't have Professor Zhu's paper, so I tried to interpret her message as much as possible. We have shared one similarity. Both of our last names start with Z. So at least my stepping as her substitute won't change the order of the presentation. So if there are any errors, remain to be mine, not of hers. So the outline initially, we began to show a few graphs on the price patterns for the major crops, meat and vegetables. Secondly, we are going to talk about the major policy response to the rising food prices. In the end, with a slide to summarize the major research issues. The first message is that supply is not a big issue in China's rising food price. I will show you a few slides. You will see there's a steady rise in wheat and rice prices. But if you look at the cropping areas and yield, in the last 8 years, China has done very well on the supply side. So here is the first slide on rice price since 2007. So this figure exactly support Professor Anderson's message that the international price, food price, is much more volatile than domestic price. You see the large variation for the international price, but if you look at the line with the squares, have been rather stable. A second message is that the food rice prices has increased steadily over time. In particular, since April 2010, international price is higher than domestic price. So China is already faced a big pressure on rising rice price. The similar pattern can be observed for wheat price. You see a large variations in wheat price, in the international market price. But for the domestic price, we observe a rather quick increase in wheat price. The wheat price has been increasing at an annual rate about 12% in the last 2 years. Third, on the maize price, Professor Zhu wants to point out that maize price is highly correlated with the pork price. If you read the economists and other media report, the pork is a big problem in China because pork constitutes a large share of China's CPI. The rising pork price has direct impact on food general prices, also cause a lot of anxiety among people because Chinese eat a lot of pork. So this maize price, you see quite a dramatic increase since 2009. The annual increase, annual growth rate is about 14% in the last 2 years. If you look at the pattern of pork, the line with the steep increase, the two lines move almost together. The pork price has increased much faster than beef, poultry, and fishery products. If you look at the price of piglet, pig, and pork, you also will see there's a quite dramatic increase in the last 2 years. In particular, since the mid 2010, the pork price has almost doubled. If you look at the vegetable price, in 2010, the vegetable price increase overtake the general CPI, Consumer Price Index. Because of the government intervention, the price dropped in 2011. If you look at the prices in 2011, the vegetable price increase is slower than general CPI. On the causes, Professor Zhu argues that the stimulus package may contribute to the rising food prices. So, having seen the global financial crisis, Chinese government had initiated one of the largest stimulus packages in the world. So the money supply increased by more than here. If you look at the growth rate in money supply between 2007 and 2011, you can see this in the 2009, the growth rate is about 30%. So with such massive amount of money flowing into the system, you can imagine the prices will go up, in particular food prices. So they have done a study in CAS, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. They found after the increase in money supply, the food prices will go up in 3 or 4 quarters. And the fifth message Professor Zhu wants to convey is that the rising food prices is also related to rising production cost. As the second speaker, Professor Catherine has pointed out, the cost is directly related to the price. In Chinese case, the cost of agriculture input, in particular those related to oil, is a big contributing factor. If you look at the price indexes in agriculture input, there are 3 lines. One is for general consumer price index. The red line with squares is for the chemical fertilizer. The line with triangles represent the agri-production services. You can see the agriculture input price have increased very quickly and in line with the general price indexes. So the rising food prices is also a result of rising agriculture input. This figure showing the major cost of stable production. The top line is overall production cost. The second line is on the material and service cost, mainly for the, I think she referred to the mechanization service cost. The third line stands for labor cost. And the last one is land rental, the bottom line. In the last 7 years, China has entered the age of labor shortage. Wage rate has increased at a rate of over 20% in the last 7 or 8 years. So with rising labor cost, farmers start to use more machinery to replace laborers. That's why you see a quite dramatic increase in machinery input in the total production cost. This very dramatic transformation in the Chinese agricultural production landscape, the rising machinery input. For machinery input, for all the tractors, machinery need oil. So the oil price, the price of machinery service will be related to the oil price. Similar for fertilizer use. So farmers may use more fertilizers to reduce labor's input. So that's the key message. But when Chinese government observed the pressure of rising food prices, the government acted very swiftly. It has done introduced many measures. For example, it increased the import of soybeans. It import about 40 million tons. Import more cotton, which all these both crops are very land and water intensive. So by importing these crops, two crops from the intermarket, it reduces the pressures on staple crops. Secondly, it also import more pork from the internal market. I think last year imported about 0.6 million tons of pork. And also the government started to introduce many measures to promote the so-called corporate farming, the contract farming, to develop the system to link farmers to consumers. There a law on rural corporate law was introduced to encourage more production associations and link farmers to the supermarkets. Lastly, there's recently a big policy change. In China, you know that it has built many highways, but everywhere there's tolls. But the new policy is that if a truck carries fresh produce, the tolls will be waived. So this greatly reduce the transaction cost and increase the domestic market integrations. And also in the last several years, every year the central government issued the #1 document to emphasize investment in the agriculture sector. Yeah, like last year's #1 report is about water. This year's is about agriculture research. So the government tried to push very hard to increase public investment in the agriculture sector. In addition, it has increased the minimal procurement price on rice and wheat. And also, I think I want to point out at one point that the government has increased the subsidies on machinery purchase. So if you buy a new tractor, the government almost subsidizes 1/2 of the prices. So that's why in the machinery mechanization services has expanded in the last very rapidly in the last several years. Because of the rising food prices, the government is very worried about social unrest from the vulnerable groups like college students, retirees, some minority groups in the remote regions. So the government recently has increased the social safety net coverage. If you read the recent Wall Street Journal, there's an article about this. China has increased the poverty line dramatically. Now the poverty line is largely in line with the international $1 per day line. Before it was much lower. As a result, more people now are put into the can enjoy the social safety net, the transfers. So they are better protect from the rising food prices. And also in the for the major colleges, the government also provides a lot of subsidies to make sure students can have very good food and at low prices in the college cafeterias. So all their measures to reduce the potential stress, potential social unrest. The question about future research, Professor Zhu want to point out that the food prices in China is highly correlated with the general macroeconomic situations, in particular the increasing money supply. So when studying food prices, it's very important to have a broad view on the general economic. Also, it's very important to look at the impact of rising food prices on farmers. So when people look at rising food prices, always think farmers will benefit. That's not necessarily true because rising input cost. So it's more careful studies on the distributional effect on farmers' income is also deserves more research. Thank you.
Thank you.